When life gets unpredictable, preparation matters. In medicine, it's all about staying alert, ready for whatever comes through the door. On the road, it's no different. That's why Volvo designs vehicles to help anticipate risk, reduce harm, and protect lives. The Volvo XC90's advanced safety systems inspire confident decisions wherever the road takes you. The Volvo XC90, for life. Proud sponsor of the Pit Podcast. Learn more at volvocars.ca/safety.
10:20 right here on CJD 800. We got Robert Libman on deck. He's going to join us in just a moment here to talk about the Quebec election campaign as we are now on day 4. I just want to get to two things that I've promised for you. Well, one thing that I promised, and I'm going to throw in another thing. So Main Street, okay? Main Street, the Main Street Research, the polling firm, they are doing a daily poll throughout the Quebec election. It began 2 days ago. They release one every afternoon. So I do want to just tell you if there's been any movement with the Main Street Research poll. It shows subtle movement here. The CAQ went up, in fact, to 40.4%. The Liberals, in the same ballpark, a little bit up to 18.7%. The Conservative Party of Quebec dropped in their day 2 poll. Okay, so the Conservative Party was at 21% on their day 1 of their polling. Now they're at 17.7%, below the Liberals. Quebec Solidaire at 11.6%. The PQ at 7.8%. Both of those are stable. Of course, these are daily pollings. You will see some fluctuation because they're daily. You know, the methodology, they're done over the internet. And, Main Street, while they're a respectable polling firm, they may not have the track record in Quebec as maybe some others. But they are doing a daily poll, which is really important just to look at trends. That's the day 2 poll. And what I have promised for you is taking a look at those tax cuts, okay? Because the CAQ, the Liberals, and the Conservative Party have promised tax cuts. Let me just give you some examples here. This is the income tax cuts that have been promised by those three parties. I'll give you two examples here. For single people, if you're a single person making $30,000 a year, okay, CAQ is promising $109 in reduction in taxes. The Liberals, $163. The Conservatives, double. The Conservative figure is basically double what the CAQ is promising at $218. Let's say you're a single person, you make $100,000, okay? CAQ promising $813 in reduction, $1,220 from the Liberals, and then the Conservative Party, double what the CAQ is promised at $1,626 is what they are promising, okay? And for families, okay, if you are a family, a couple, the CAQ at $425, Liberals at $637, and the Conservatives at $850, okay? So just to keep it in perspective here, the Conservative Party of Quebec promising double the tax rebates, or the tax reduction, than the Conservatives. The Liberals lie right in the middle, okay? Let's talk more politics as it's day 4 of the election campaign, and it will be a long and interesting journey to October 3rd. Robert Libman, former MNA, former leader of the Equality Party in the National Assembly, a Gazette political columnist. Robert, thanks for coming back on.
Good morning, Elias.
First things first, what's your take on the Liberals struggling to fill a roster of 125 candidates here? They're apparently 15 or 17 short, depending on who you ask.
Well, it's clear that they're not going in the right direction, and many people don't see much of a future. If you want to attract quality candidates, high-profile candidates, you've got to perhaps have the possibility of promising them a ministry, and it doesn't look very likely at all that the Liberals will form a government and be able to offer a cabinet position to a new candidate. It's difficult for them. Even in my riding, the riding where I was in the National Assembly, Darcy McGee, they had a lot of trouble finding a candidate for that riding, which had typically, for generations, been the Liberals' strongest seat, the Liberal stronghold. And David Birnbaum, who certainly had his struggles there, especially over Bill 96, they ended up putting in a staffer. His his chief of staff ended up being the candidate there. So that shows that the Liberals, even in ridings that they have a strong chance of winning or a good chance of winning, possibly having trouble finding candidates. Not a good sign for them.
And that's so interesting, Robert, because that's as far as the Liberals go in this election, that's as close to a guaranteed win as possible right now. and they're struggling there. I brought up in the first hour of the show, have you seen what happened in Jean Talon, the riding in Quebec City, which, was liberal from 1966 to 2018. Liberal for 50 years plus. They had to take a staffer. They couldn't find anyone to run.
But some of their Anglo ridings, such as Darcy-McGee, or Anglophone majority ridings such as Darcy-McGee, aren't such a sure thing anymore. These are the ridings that fell to the Equality Party in '89 because Quebec Anglophones were upset with the Liberals, and certainly that has repeated itself, and it's a battle. It'll be a dogfight in that riding and some of the other Anglophone ridings to see whether these new parties emerge and are able to take some of the vote, and whether even the Conservative Party and Eric Duhem can capture some of the Anglo vote. You mentioned the Main Street poll a few minutes ago. I'm not sure if they had any of the two new parties numbers in there, but they certainly would be chipping away at some of those Liberal numbers. So I haven't seen that poll, but maybe you have.
So
have they shown those new parties?
It's others, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So others are at 3.7%. Okay.
Had they named those, they would probably take a chunk off the Liberal number. I can guarantee that at this point.
And of course, when you're talking about, people like, let's say, the Canadian Party of Quebec, they're not running in every riding, right? So those numbers are going to be low. Just like when you do polling nationally for federal politics, and you got the Bloc Québécois polling at 6 or 7%. Okay. So what I want to get your perspective here, Robert, and you've brought it up here, and obviously with your role in Quebec politics with the Equality Party ending up in the National Assembly. Give me your take here. Canadian Party of Quebec, Bloc Montréal, and then maybe it's the Conservative Party here. What do you think is the winning strategy, let's say, for these parties in Darcy-McGee, in Westmount St. Louis, in the West Island? What should these parties be doing to dethrone the Liberals?
Well, I think these parties add a significant value to this election campaign, and they're certainly representing groups that are inadequately represented in Quebec City in the National Assembly. Bloc Montreal, reflecting some of the concerns of Montreal, came out with certain policy initiative statements this past week, which could certainly very much add to the debate in Quebec City, giving 20% of the sales tax generated in the region to the city, or the congestion fee for vehicles on the island of Montreal. These are very interesting ideas that certainly have merit to be debated on the floor of the National Assembly, as municipalities or Montreal is a creature of the provincial government. So I think there's very much of a value to add that to the debate, and if they can elect one or two MNAs to at least bring some of that perspective to Quebec City, which is typically absent, is very valuable. Same with the Canadian Party for Quebec. Quebec Anglophones, as you know, are never given attention in Quebec City, and by having independent voices in question period, or the ability to block unanimous motions, the ability to force debates without notice, which is something on the agenda on a daily basis in the National Assembly, certainly gives us a presence and a visibility on the floor of the National Assembly that we otherwise wouldn't have. So I think they have to focus on some of these key ridings. Ideally, if they could avoid splitting the vote between themselves, they would have a much better chance of snatching a few of these seats. And I think they could really contribute something to the debate if they're successful in doing so. Sneaking 2 or 3 or 4 ridings would certainly be a benefit to those groups that are not represented adequately in Quebec City.
Canadian Party of Quebec, let's talk about them just a little bit more there, as you've been talking about them, Robert. I would say, and I know they're not a perfect match here, but if I had to pick the one that was most Equality Party-esque, I would say Canadian Party of Quebec. They've been hard, very hard on 96, and they yesterday saying we're going to let parents choose what schools from elementary to university, where you send your children, where you go to school. That's what we would do. So they're going hard on this. Would you suggest to them, get on the ground and be the absolute anti-96 and free choice for language rights? Would you say get on the ground and just hit that over the head over and over and over? That their best strategy?
I think it is, and we did that. We played to the emotional disenchantment of Anglophones back in 1989, and it certainly worked. There was a lot of anger out there, and we offered the opportunity to have their voices directly linked into the National Assembly. And what we provided, there are other policies that they'll be called upon to provide and respond to. And when we were in the National Assembly, where there was issues dealing with language or education, we dealt with that. We eventually developed a political platform, but the people voting for us wanted us to be their voice wanted to be their representative voice in the National Assembly on issues that otherwise get short shrift. And that's where they have to focus on it. And I think they've been doing a decent job of it. The question now is, will they be building enough of an organization to get the vote out, to do tracking, to do enough publicity and generate enough name recognition for their candidates to be able to snatch a couple of seats? And it's certainly possible. There's a lot of good candidates that both parties have named, and I think that they do have a chance of winning one or two of these ridings, possibly.
Robert, I'm going to ask you about the crystal ball that you're holding in your hands. I will not hold you to any prediction here, and I'll ask you once again before this election happens. Who's going to finish second?
Well, that seems to be the only question. I have a feeling that Quebec Solidaire might finish second. It all depends on whether or not Duhem can make a bit of a breakthrough in Quebec City. Will he be able to win seats? He's certainly been running a good campaign. Everyone's talking about him so far, and they will continue to talk about him. But will he make enough of a dent behind the CAQ to win seats? If he wins a cluster of seats in Quebec City, he could finish second. But I think right now, if I had to bet, I'd put my money on Quebec Solidaire winning, but not many. I don't think the opposition will get more than 10 seats anyways.
Oh, boy.
They will divide probably about 26, 27 seats among themselves. So I don't think it's going to be much, but I think Quebec Solidaire will probably finish second if an election was held today.
In that scenario, October 4th will also be a very important day. Robert Libman, keep writing those words. Thanks so much.
All the best. Bye-bye.